They didn't come to my graduation. But 6 months later, when they found out what I had built without them, my phone rang 43 times in a single hour. 43 calls. Not one of them came when I needed it. This is the story of the morning I walked across a stage alone, the years I built a life in silence, and the day my family drove past my house without knowing it was mine. My name is Callie. I'm 28 years old, and I want to tell you about the moment I understood that some people will only see your value once they realize they've lost access to it. But to understand that moment, you have to start at the beginning. Not the beginning of the story, but the beginning of the pattern. Because what happened on my graduation day didn't come out of nowhere. It was the last event in a sequence that had been running since I was old enough to notice who got celebrated and who got managed. I grew up in a mid-sized town in the southeast, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and nobody forgets anything. My parents, Donna and Ray, had been together since high school. My father worked in commercial insurance. My mother ran the front office of a dental practice. They were not bad people. I want to be precise about that because this story isn't about monsters. It's about something quieter and more corrosive than cruelty. It's about preference, practiced over years, disguised as love. My brother Marcus was 3 years older than me, and from the very beginning the household ran on his schedule. His baseball games, his friends, his needs, his future. Not because my parents sat down and decided to deprioritize their daughter. I don't think they ever made that choice consciously. It was just the architecture of our family, built so gradually that nobody stepped back to look at the whole structure. When I was 12, my mother forgot to pick me up from school. I waited for 40 minutes before calling her. She arrived apologetic. She'd been watching Marcus's scrimmage. I said it was okay. It wasn't. But saying so would have cost more than it was worth. When I was 15, I won a district science competition. My school's principal called the house. My father said, "That's great," and asked what was for dinner. When Marcus graduated high school the following year, my parents threw him a party in the backyard, rented a tent, had the party catered. I invited 40 people. My grandfather gave a speech about potential and the Rawlings name. Marcus stood at the center of it, sunburned and laughing, holding a card stuffed with cash. I stood near the fence eating potato salad and thinking, I wonder what they'll do when I graduate. 2 years later I had my answer. Nothing. I earned a place at a state university 3 hours from home. My grades were good, better than good actually, and I received a partial academic scholarship that covered about a third of my tuition. I was proud of that. I brought the scholarship letter home and set it on the kitchen table. My mother looked at it and said, "That helps. Not congratulations. Not we're so proud of you. Just that helps." My father didn't look up from the television. The same week my parents co-signed a lease on a new apartment for Marcus. He had taken a sales job in the city and needed a place. They also bought him a sectional sofa because my mother explained, he needed a space where he could relax and decompress. He was 22 years old and had never paid a utility bill. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of my bed, and started making a spreadsheet. Tuition minus scholarship, books, housing, food, transportation. I ran the numbers twice. Then I started looking for a second job. For 2 years before I started university I worked a grocery store during high school, a restaurant on the weekends. I saved with the focus of someone who has understood at 17 that no safety net is coming. I paid for my first semester entirely myself, then my second, then my third and fourth and onward for 4 years, every class and every textbook and every meal and every month of rent on a small apartment I shared with 2 other girls who were doing the same math I was. My father drove through my university town occasionally on his way to visit clients. He never stopped by. Not once in 4 years. There was one phone call I still remember. I saw his name on my screen and picked up fast, heart beating with the stupid optimism that hope never quite extinguishes no matter how many times it gets ignored. "Do you know a good tire place near campus?" he asked. "Ray's cousin is coming through and needs a patch." I gave him a name. He said thanks. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while afterward. My mother called more regularly, but those calls had their own particular shape. "How are your classes? How's the weather? Did you talk to Marcus lately? He just got a raise." I learned to give short answers and ask questions because when I shared anything real, a grade, a project I was proud of, a professor who had taken notice of my work, the response was always a version of "That's nice, honey," followed by a pivot back to Marcus. So I stopped sharing. Not out of bitterness. Out of efficiency. There was one person who saw what I was doing. Dr. Lenora Okafor, my financial accounting professor. She was 63 years old, small, precise, with reading glasses she wore on a beaded chain and an expression that missed nothing. She noticed my work in my first semester and called me into her office. "You're doing well," she said. "Where do you want to be in 10 years? Nobody in my life had asked me that question. I stared at her for a second. "Running my own firm," I said. "Or close enough to it." She wrote something down. "All right. Come back when you need a letter of recommendation." She became the closest thing I had to a mentor, and eventually to a witness. When I told her in my junior year about what home looked like, not bitterly, just factually, she listened without performing sympathy and then said one thing: "Keep your work quiet until it's finished. Some people mistake your ambition for arrogance and your success for a threat." I wrote that down. I carried it with me. By the time graduation arrived, I had completed 4 years with honors. My GPA was 3.8. I had won an accounting department achievement award. I had lined up a part-time position with a mid-sized firm that Dr. Okafor had connected me to, with the understanding that a full-time offer could follow if the fit was right. I sent a message to the family group chat 3 weeks before. Graduation is May 17th. 10 a.m. I've reserved seats. I would love for everyone to be there. Marcus sent a thumbs up. My father said nothing. My mother sent a heart emoji 2 days later. The morning of graduation, I stood in my apartment bathroom trying to zip my gown while the zipper snagged repeatedly on the inner fabric. Took 6 attempts. When I finally got it closed, I looked at myself in the mirror. Cap slightly crooked, gown pressed the night before. The tassel I'd paid extra to personalize hanging at my left shoulder. And I thought, you did this yourself. Every single part of it. I took a photo and sent it to the group chat. Walking across the stage today. Wish me luck. Marcus sent a fire emoji. My parents said nothing. I drove to the university. The auditorium held thousands of people. The sound when I walked in hit me first. A wall of warmth and noise, voices layered over voices, the shuffling of programs, laughter from every direction. Families were already filling the designated sections. I found my seat in the graduate block and looked toward the family area. 3 chairs, reserved with small printed cards. All empty. I texted my mother. "Are you close?" She read it. No reply. I texted Marcus. "Are Mom and Dad coming?" He replied 2 minutes later. "Can't make it, I have to open the store today." I put my phone in my gown pocket. The zipper I had struggled with that morning suddenly felt like a metaphor so obvious it was almost funny. Some things you just have to work out yourself no matter how long it takes. At 9:58, someone sat down in one of the reserved chairs. My heart moved before my mind did. I turned and it wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It was Dr. Lenora Okafor in a cream blazer, holding a small bouquet of orange lilies, her reading glasses on the chain around her neck. She found me in the crowd. She nodded once. Not a performance. Just "I see you. I'm here." I nodded back. I made it through the procession without crying. When they called my name, Callista and Merriman, Bachelor of Science in Accounting summa cum laude, I walked across that stage with my spine straight and my hands steady. And from somewhere in the family section, I heard a single voice rise clearly above the polite applause. "That's my student, Dr. Okafor." I smiled at the dean, shook his hand, took my diploma and kept walking. The auditorium held thousands of people. The sound when I walked in hit me first. A wall of warmth and noise, voices layered over voices, the shuffling of programs, laughter from every direction. Families were already filling the designated sections. I found my seat in the graduate block and looked toward the family area. 3 chairs, reserved with small printed cards. All empty. I texted my mother. "Are you close?" She read it. No reply. I texted Marcus. "Are Mom and Dad coming?" He replied 2 minutes later. "Can't make it, I have to open the store today." I put my phone in my gown pocket. The zipper I had struggled with that morning suddenly felt like a metaphor so obvious it was almost funny. Some things you just have to work out yourself no matter how long it takes. At 9:58, someone sat down in one of the reserved chairs. My heart moved before my mind did. I turned and it wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It was Dr. Lenora Okafor in a cream blazer, holding a small bouquet of orange lilies, her reading glasses on the chain around her neck. She found me in the crowd. She nodded once. Not a performance. Just I see you. I'm here. I nodded back. I made it through the procession without crying. When they called my name, Callista and Merriman, Bachelor of Science in Accounting summa cum laude, I walked across that stage with my spine straight and my hand steady. And from somewhere in the family section, I heard a single voice rise clearly above the polite applause. That's my student, Dr. Okafor. I smiled at the dean, shook his hand, took my diploma and kept walking. After the ceremony, families poured into the corridors and outside onto the lawn. People posed for photos, held flowers, cried on each other. I sat on a concrete bench near the east entrance with my diploma folder in my lap and my phone face up on my knee. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Behind her voice, music. Silverware against plates. Background chatter and what sounded like a booth at a restaurant. "Hi, baby," she said. Warm and distracted. "Mom, the ceremony just ended." A pause. Not a surprised pause. An adjusting pause. "How was it?" "It was good." I walked. "Summa cum laude." "Oh, that's wonderful." The warmth in her voice was real but thin. The warmth of someone hearing good news about a stranger's child. Pleasant but uninvested. "Where are you?" I asked. Another pause. Shorter. "We're at Carver's. It's Marcus's promotion dinner." Marcus's promotion dinner. I looked at the diploma folder in my hand. At the gold embossed seal of the university. At my name printed on the cover in formal serif type. "I see," I said. "We'll celebrate with you soon," my mother said. "We can do a dinner next week. Whatever you want." In the background I heard my father's voice, not his words, just his register. Casual, unhurried, the voice of a man at ease. "Okay," I said. "Have a good dinner." I hung up. I opened my phone's browser and went to my mother's Facebook. The most recent post had been uploaded 47 minutes ago, while I was sitting in that auditorium waiting for my name to be called. A photo of my parents, Marcus, and his girlfriend at a restaurant booth. All of them smiling. My father's arm around Marcus. My mother beaming. The caption. "So proud of this guy. Hard work always pays off. Family first. Family first." I put my phone in my pocket. Dr. Okafor found me there a few minutes later. She set the orange lilies on the bench beside me without a word. Then sat down and folded her hands. "They didn't come," I said. "No," she said. "They're at my brother's promotion dinner." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "The work you did still happened. The grade is still the grade. The diploma is still the diploma. None of that changes based on who was in the room." I nodded. My throat was tight. She patted my hand once and stood up. "First of many," she said. Then she walked away. I found her flowers in my car when I got to the parking lot. She'd already gone. Tucked under the windshield wiper was a card in her handwriting. "First of many achievements." Hello. I sat in the car for a long time before driving home. That night I made two decisions. The first, I was done announcing things to people who used my announcements as opportunities to redirect the conversation. No more updates. No more asking for acknowledgement. Whatever I built next, I would build it quietly, and I would share it when I chose to with people who had earned the right to witness it. The second, I was going to start applying for jobs in the morning. 11 applications before noon the next day. Accounting firms, financial services, a regional bank, 2 corporate audit teams. I had my grades, my award, Dr. Okafor's recommendation letter, and a specific practiced answer to the question every interviewer eventually asked. Why accounting? Because numbers are honest. They don't have favorites. They don't ask who your parents are. They just tell the truth. 2 weeks later, my mother called to suggest a family dinner. An apology dinner phrased as a casual meal. I went. Part of me still operated on the hope that proximity could substitute for change. It cannot. But I hadn't learned that completely yet. The dinner was at my parents' house. Pot roast. My mother's attempt at warmth expressed as carbohydrates. For a few minutes after I arrived, things felt almost normal. She hugged me, asked about the apartment, complimented my jacket. I sat down. I started to relax. Then Marcus arrived. He came in the way he always arrived, like the room had been waiting, dropped his keys on the counter, helped himself to a beer, sat down at the head of the table where my father always sat. My father moved to one side without commenting. The conversation pivoted to Marcus. His promotion details, his new salary range, his plans, his girlfriend's plans, the apartment my parents were helping him move into. The deposit was $3,400. My mother knew the square footage and the distance from his office. She spoke about it like she was moving in herself. I waited for a pause. I have a second interview next week, I said. With Harmon and Voss. It's a mid-sized firm, strong client list. Dr. Okafor made an introduction. My father looked up. Accounting? Yes. He nodded slowly. Steady work, I suppose. My mother smiled in my direction for a half-second, then turned back to Marcus. So, do you think you'll take the parking spot or just use the garage? Later, while I was washing dishes, I heard my father in the living room. Kelly always thought she was operating at a different level, he said to Marcus. We'll see how the real world goes. The water kept running. I kept washing. I drove home. 2 days later, I went to my second interview. The firm was on the 4th floor of a building on Commerce Street, wood-paneled walls, a receptionist who offered me coffee, tall windows that looked out over the city. The managing partner, a woman named Elaine Harmon, interviewed me herself. Sharp, measured, no wasted words. She asked me about my methods, my tolerance for high-stakes deadlines, my approach to client relationships. Then she asked, "What do you do when you're in an environment where your work isn't valued?" I answered without hesitating. I document everything carefully, I hold my own standard, and I find a better environment as quickly as possible. She wrote something down. 3 days later, her assistant called. Miss Harmon would like to extend you a formal offer. The salary was $61,400 plus benefits, and a year-end review with merit increase eligibility. The highest salary I had ever been offered. The highest salary I had ever imagined, honestly. At 24 years old with no financial runway and no family money. I accepted. I called Dr. Okafor. She made a sound like someone who had expected this and was gratified to be right. I called my friend Becca, who screamed into the phone for 30 solid seconds. Then I sat with my phone and looked at my parents' contact information. My thumb hovered. I put the phone down. This one was mine. I was keeping it. The months that followed were the quietest and the fullest of my life. I worked hard. Elaine Harmon was exacting in fair and equal measure, the kind of supervisor who pushed without humiliating, who gave feedback precisely because she expected you to act on it. My confidence grew in a way that felt different from before. Not the shaky approval-seeking confidence of someone hoping to be noticed, but the solid interior kind that comes from repeatedly doing difficult things and watching yourself succeed. My savings grew too. I had been tracking a number since I was 19 years old. A down payment number. I had been adding to it for 6 years through every shift, every overtime hour, every holiday I worked instead of traveled. When I got the Harmon and Voss salary, I did the math again. I ran the amortization tables. I pulled up property listings. I was ready. My friend Becca came apartment hunting with me, then house hunting. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, she stood beside me in front of a 2-bedroom Craftsman on Birchwood Lane and watched me do the math in my head one more time. You're doing it, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm doing it. The house was $187,500. White siding, a covered front porch, a yard with 2 old oak trees and a gate that needed a new hinge. It needed work. I didn't care. What I cared about was that the street it sat on, Birchwood Lane, was a road my parents drove at least 3 times a week to get to their favorite grocery store and my father's Saturday barbershop. They had driven past that house hundreds of times. They had never known what was waiting inside the numbers I had been building. If this story is landing somewhere deep, if you know what it is to build something real in silence while the people who should have been your loudest champions look the other way, you are not alone. Subscribe to the Betrayal Files. New stories every week for people who understand exactly how this feels. Closing day was a Thursday in January. I signed paperwork for nearly an hour in a conference room with my real estate attorney, my lender's representative, and Becca, who had taken a half day off work to be there. Page after page. signature after signature. The stack of documents was nearly 2 inches thick. When it was done, the attorney slid a single key across the table. "Congratulations," she said. "You're a homeowner." The key was cold from sitting on the table, small and plain and heavier than it had any reason to be. Becca and I drove to the house. I put the key in the lock, turned it. The door swung open and the smell of the empty house came out to meet us. Old wood and faint paint and the particular quiet of a space waiting to become something. My eyes went blurry. Not from sadness. From something I didn't have a clean word for. Relief, maybe. The particular exhaustion of having carried something heavy for a very long time, and finally being allowed to set it down. We took photos on the porch. One of them showed me holding the key and grinning in a way I don't think I had grinned since I was a child, before I understood the geometry of my family. Becca posted it to her social media that night with the caption, "Callie bought a house all by herself, and I am crying about it." I posted my own the next morning. Me on the porch. The sold sign visible behind me. 6 years of saving. 0 family money. First-generation homeowner. Built it myself. My parents were blocked. They couldn't see my profile. But small towns are small. Extended family chat groups span everything. My mother's sister, my Aunt Cecily, the one relative who had always been straightforwardly kind to me, who had shown up for my high school graduation when my parents hadn't, who sent me $20 every birthday regardless of what was happening in the family. She shared my photo into the extended family group chat. "Look at our girl," she wrote. "So proud of you, Callie baby." My parents saw it within the hour. Then my phone started ringing. 43 times in 60 minutes. I know because my phone logs every call attempt. My mother. My father. My mother again. My father. My mother. My mother. My mother. I watched the screen light up and go dark. Light up and go dark. After 6 years of silence, of managed distance, of "that's nice honey and your brother just got promoted," and empty graduation chairs and a Facebook post going up while I walked across the stage. After all of it, they were calling now. Not because they had changed. Because they had missed something. That distinction matters. I didn't answer. My father discovered the specifics the next morning. He drove past Birchwood Lane on his way to the barbershop, the way he had driven past it for years, and this time he saw my car in the driveway. He recognized it, the old blue Civic with the dent in the rear bumper I'd never gotten fixed. He pulled over. Sat there for a while. Long enough that my neighbor across the street, an older woman named Mrs. Falconer, thought he looked suspicious and nearly called someone. He drove away without knocking. Marcus showed up that afternoon. He stood at my front door in a jacket I didn't recognize, new, expensive looking, and stared at the house the way people stare at things that rearrange their understanding of the world. I opened the door before he knocked. He looked at me, then past me at the entry hall, then back at me. "Nice place," he said. "Thank you. Mom wants to talk to you." "I know." He shifted his weight. He was 31 years old, and for the first time in his life standing on my porch, he looked genuinely uncertain. Not nervous, Marcus didn't do nervous. Uncertain. Like the floor had shifted slightly and he was recalibrating. "I didn't know it was this bad," he said. I looked at him steadily. "You didn't want to know." That landed. I watched it land. We stood in silence for a moment. "I don't hate you," I said. "I don't hate any of you. I just stopped waiting for you to decide I was worth paying attention to." He nodded. Opened his mouth. Closed it. Then he nodded again and walked back to his truck. I watched him go. On the passenger seat, just visible through the window, sat a small bundle of flowers, grocery store carnations, white with a card tucked in the wrapper. He had brought them. He had never handed them to me. He drove away with them still on the seat. 3 days later, my mother came to the door. She had done something with her hair. It was set the way she set it for church and for difficult conversations, a detail I recognized without thinking. Her eyes were red at the edges. She looked at the house the way my father had at the hospital when I was small and got a fever that scared him. Not tender exactly, but present in a way she usually wasn't. "You bought a house," she said. "Yes. You didn't tell me." I looked at her for a moment. "Mom, I graduated summa cum laude and you were at a restaurant. I got a job at a respected firm and you told Aunt Cecily you hoped I wouldn't be disappointed. I have been building something real for 6 years, And every time I shared any part of it, the conversation moved to Marcus inside of 30 seconds. I paused. Why would I tell you about the house? Her jaw tightened, then softened. I know, she said. Very quiet. I know. I waited. She looked down at the porch boards. What do you want from me, Callie? The answer had been inside me for years, simple and clear, the way things are when you've had a long time to think about them. I want you to think hard about why your daughter bought a house on a road you drive 3 times a week, and you had absolutely no idea. She looked up. Her eyes were wet. I had spent 28 years watching my mother manage her emotions by redirecting them. For the first time standing on my own porch, she had nowhere to redirect them. She stayed for a few minutes. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't apologize in any complete, honest way. It came out in fragments, half sentences, things that circled the real admission without landing on it. But she stayed. And she cried. And when she left, she paused at the bottom of my porch steps and looked back at me with an expression I had not seen from her since I was very small. She saw me. Not as the second child, not as the cautionary tale, not as the manageable disappointment. She saw me. I'll call you, she said. Okay, Mom. She got in the car. I watched her drive away down Birchwood Lane. Here's what happened after. My parents did not immediately transform into the family I had needed them to be. That isn't how people work. My mother called more often. The calls were different, shorter, somehow more careful, the way you speak when you've become aware of the weight your words carry. My father called once about 6 weeks later. He said he was proud of me. The words came out in a flat, halting way, like he was reading something he'd written out. I thanked him. We talked for 9 minutes. He asked about the oak trees in the yard. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Marcus texted me a week after his visit. Just, seriously nice place. I mean it. I texted back, thanks. We weren't close. We still aren't. But the fiction that everything was fine between us, the fiction that had covered up the actual dynamic for 30 years, was gone. What replaced it was something more honest, if also thinner. We're 2 people who share parents and a childhood. That's what we have. I'm at peace with that. Dr. Okafor came for dinner the March after I moved in. She brought wine and a small wooden box she'd found at an antique market, she said, that reminded her of something she couldn't name. She sat at my table in my house and I fed her the pot roast recipe I'd been perfecting since January, and she told me about the student she'd taken a chance on a few years ago who had recently made partner at a firm in another city. That could be you, she said. It will be, I said. She smiled like she already knew. I think about the graduation day a lot. Not with bitterness, not anymore, but with something more complicated. A kind of clear-eyed understanding that the image of those 3 empty chairs was, in its way, the most accurate portrait my family ever gave me of themselves. Some people will not show up for the accomplishment. They will, however, show up the moment they discover the magnitude of what you built in their absence. 43 calls in 60 minutes. Years of silence. Then 43 calls. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I had already spent 24 years performing for people who were rarely available in return, and I had finally stopped. The diploma hangs in my home office now, next to a small framed card in handwriting I recognize. First of many achievements. Below it, a photo of me on my porch the day I got the key, grinning like someone who has just set down a very heavy bag and realized they don't have to pick it up again. I built every piece of this myself. 1 shift, 1 semester, 1 paycheck, 1 sleepless Sunday, 1 form, 1 signature, 1 cold key in a conference room on a Thursday in January. No help. No co-signed anything. No truck with a bow on it, no deposit check, no easy on-ramp. Just me, a spreadsheet, in 6 years. The question I keep turning over, the one I genuinely don't know the answer to, is this. If they had shown up to the graduation, would I have told them about the house? Would I have let them in earlier, trusted them sooner, shared the victories instead of protecting them? I think about that. I genuinely do. Would you have kept the door open? Or did the empty chairs teach you something that no amount of later showing up could undo? Tell me below. Because I still don't know what the right answer is. Beach balloon. Names and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. This story is inspired by real events shared online and adapted for storytelling purposes.